Well, Shalom Aleichem. My name is Yosef. It's a custom in Am Yisrael to go over the halachot, the halachic laws of every single holiday before we enter the holiday. Coming upon us is Pesach, Passover. So we figured it was appropriate to go over the halachot of Pesach. And while doing that, I'm hoping to share it with everybody who might be interested. Well, let's get started. First of all, we are going to be learning out of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which is the abridged version of the Shulchan Aruch. And I'm just going to translate it to English. So the first halacha discusses the time of checking. We're going to be talking about checking and destroying the Chametz. So the first seif, the first paragraph talks about, it says that on the first night before Erev Pesach, before the beginning of Passover, a person should check for the Chametz. And a person has to check immediately in the beginning of the night. So as soon as night falls, that's the proper time to check. And a person should not eat or do any other milacha, should not do any other work a half hour before the night. Okay, that's the first seif. The second one, which discusses the candle which a person should check for the chametz with. So, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch tells us a person should not check only with a nail, with a candle of wax, one wax candle, right? And he should not use a candle that has more than one wick. Why? So the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch tells us, Mishum dehave ka'avuka, because it's going to be more like a torch. And apparently with a smaller light, a person can actually see, crumbs and smaller things a lot easier than with a torch. So the proper light to use is a one-wicked candle. She'en lo ner shesha'ava, right? So if a person doesn't have a wax candle, the Kitzur tells us, yivdok b'ner shel chelev, he can actually use a candle made out of fats. I guess in those days they had, perhaps it's like an oil candle or something, but they used to use animal fat in order to use for candles. Halacha Gimel. Bodek kol hachadarim. A person has to check all the rooms. Sheyesh lachosh shem yechnusu b'hem chametz. A person should check every single room that he might think that there will be chametz in there. He says here, afilo martefim va'aliyot va'achenuyot v'ubet ha'etzim, even the basements or the attics or the store, a person's store, like storehouse, or his place where they used to store wood. Any place that you think that you would have brought chametz into, you have to check in that place. And you have to search in every single place, every single utensil that holds chametz, so anything that you've used for chametz. And before the bedika, a person should go and clean before he checks. Before the final checking, a person should clean all the places that normally have chametz. And the reason for that is so that you don't want to find any chametz during bedika. By the time of the bedika, you should have cleaned everything already, and it's just the last check before we go into the next day, which we will be burning the chametz, which we'll be talking about soon. Halacha Daled. This doesn't apply to every single one of us, but it's still applicable to some of us. This discusses a barn or a chicken coop, right? So let's say you have a barn for cattle, right, that you give over there all sorts of grains for the cattle to eat, right? And also a chicken coop that you give by them all sorts of grains. Over there, he says, you don't need to check those places. Because we know that that grain by nature is not actually chametz. The time that the grain becomes chametz is when it becomes wet and is left for a certain amount of time. So a person can assume over there by the animal barn or by the coop, that you can say that it doesn't need to be checked because perhaps it did not become chametz yet. It's still grain. It's just grain sitting there, but it did not become chametz yet. Vim timtza lamanin nit chamtzan. If you want to say that maybe it became chametz, so you can also assume that the animals would have ate it all and not left a little bit. It is the nature of animals to finish all the food that surrounds them, and you can assume that they did not leave any bit. But let's say you put over there, let's say they make some sort of a mash with the grain for the animals, which would be chametz because it's water and grain, and obviously it went over its time, which is the 18 minutes that things become chametz, which things become leaven. There you only have one suffix. Perhaps the animals didn't eat everything. So we only have one doubt over here. What's the question? The question is, did the animals eat all of the leaven mash that was brought in to feed them? So we say on that, because there's only one doubt over here, then you don't rely on that. And there, you do need to check. So in a place that you bring in chametz food for animals, you do need to check it. If you're just bringing in grain, which possibly will not become chametz or did not become chametz, then there's no requirement to check. So now we're on Seif Hey, which talks about a person has to check in all the little holes and all the little cracks, everything that you're able to. Also, you must check the pockets of the clothing, of your clothing, and that of the little children, that sometimes they put in their chametz. So there you need to do Bedika. Those things are chayav in Bedika. Bedika is checking to find that there are no chametz there, or to find that there is, and to get rid of it. And you should shake them off very well the next day, by the time of the bi'ul. Bi'ul is the ridding of the chametz, literally the burning of the chametz. The next halacha, halacha vav, halacha 6, it discusses the rooms that we sell to a goy. There's a custom in Am Yisrael that the chametz, or not 100% chametz foods, can be sold to a guy over the yantiv, and usually this is done by the local rabbi, and they sell it, and that way after Pesach a person can buy it back. We don't. The Torah doesn't want people to lose, to have a hefsed, which they call it, which is a loss, a monetary loss. So it gives a loophole and an option where a person can actually sell the chametz. Therefore, he doesn't own any of the chametz, or does not have it with him, or it's locked up in a room. And that way, he doesn't have to burn all his food. You know that a lot of times it's difficult for people to throw out or burn their food, and it could be wasteful. So there is that option of selling it. There is a custom in Am Yisrael not to sell 100% chametz, which is bread and things like that, pretzels, anything that's leaven or a leaven, or any sourdough products or anything like that. Some people still do that, but it's generally accepted that the things that are not 100% chametz, which we just, for example, kitniot, beans, things like that, those things are able to be sold. So he says here that the rooms that a person sells to a goy that has chametz in them, since that they are not going to be sold until the next day, because you actually sell them the next day. We're still holding in the night of the checking, and we're talking about the next day, which is the day which we'll be doing the burning. So since that you're only going to be burning the chametz tomorrow, and we're still in time of checking, the halacha is that you should still check those places that you'll be selling. So now we come to the actual checking. This is halacha zayin, halacha number 7. A person actually, before he begins doing the checking, he has to say a bracha, which we say Baruch Atah with the continuation, and Asher Kidishanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al bi'ur chametz, that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu made us separate and gave us the mitzvot, and He commanded us on the bi'ur chametz, on the burning of the chametz. So, common question is, if you're only doing the checking, how come the bracha, the blessing, is actually going on the bi'ur? So he says over here that even though we are not going to be burning it till tomorrow, still we say al bi'ul, we say on the burning of the chametz, because right after we check the chametz, a person actually will be nullifying the chametz that he does not know about. And this nullification that a person does for the chametz that he does not know about also falls under the category of bi'ul, which is ridding of chametz, which is burning the chametz. And it says it's very important not to make a separation between the blessing that you say to the actual checking. So we try not to do that generally in any bracha that a person makes. On a certain thing, you shouldn't make a hifsek, you shouldn't make a separation or pause too long or do something that's unrelated between the saying of the bracha and the actual checking for the chametz. And it's a very good thing if a person doesn't make a hifsek, doesn't make a separation between the blessing until after the entire checking of the chametz, meaning he went through the house with the candle and everything, and he checked, and only then does he do something only then does he do whatever he wants to do, and resumes with his regular activities. And he says over here that a person can obviously, do things that are on the topic of the Bedika. So if it's related to what you're doing, related to the topic of the Bedika, then it's okay. And he adds at the end over here that it's okay to check several houses with one blessing. Let's say a person has a couple houses, so the person can actually do it all under one blessing. There's a minhag in Am Yisrael that people should put different pieces of bread in different places so that the person who's searching for the chametz, who's doing the Bedika, will find it. Because we have a suspicion that possibly he might not actually find anything in the Bedika, in the search for the chametz, and then the blessing will be in vain, and we don't want the blessing to be in vain. So therefore we put those pieces all over the house in certain areas so that the bracha won't be in vain in case he doesn't find anything. Upshita, ki misha eno bodek karoi, a person, and simply he says, and obviously a person who doesn't check like he's supposed to, ela shehu mekabetz elot tetim, and he's only out there to search for those, let's say 10 little pieces of bread. Most people, their custom is to do 10 little pieces of bread in foil, and they make sure to make a list because you don't want to lose those pieces of bread in your house right before Pesach. So if the person is doing it and he's only looking for those pieces of bread, so he too, was not mekayim the Bedika like it's supposed to be done, and he too made a bracha levatala. So a person must be careful. We learn from here that a person must be careful with the brachot and to always make them properly and never in vain. Halakha tet. This one discusses where to keep the chametz that a person finds on the night of Bedikat Chametz. What is he supposed to do with that chametz? Okay. A chametz shehu mishayer la'achila u'lemchira. A person who is saving chametz. Let's say you're still able to eat chametz in the morning of Erev Pesach. You have a few hours where you're able to still eat the chametz. So let's say he's saving that chametz either for eating or for selling. Yaniach kodem abdika makom hameshumar heitev. He should keep that chametz in a place. He should keep it safe in a place and watched well, aside from everything else that he's got ready for Pesach. And also the chametz that you find in your checking, and that he has to burn tomorrow. You should keep it in a safe place, tied up and well kept. That it shouldn't be lost from him. And he should put it in a place that tomorrow he'll be able to find it and you won't forget it and you won't forget to burn it. Halakha yud. After a person checks for the chametz, immediately he should do the bitul, which is the nullification. How does this nullification work? The main part of the nullification must be done in the heart of the person. That a person should think in his heart that all of the chametz that he has in his possession, it's like it doesn't exist at all. And it's not important at all, and it's like he doesn't even have it. We're doing a nullification of all the chametz that we might have that we didn't find. V'harehu kemo afal, and we think to ourselves, and we also say it. There's also a certain verse that we say, and we say that it's like kemo afal. It's like dust, and something that has I have no need for whatsoever. So the rabbis also told us, our sages also said, that a person should not, even though the main part is in your heart, a person should also say it in his mouth, and he should say the nusach, the verse, which the rabbis wrote for us, and it's actually in Aramaic. It's called Kol Chamira, and a person can find that in the Siddur. After the Bedika, there's a nusach, there's a verse that says Kol Chamira, and basically over there it is the words of the nullification of the Chametz. A person who doesn't know the meaning of those words, Yomar Belashon Shumavin, he should say it in his language. So there are English Siddurim or other languages that a person can find and say the nullification right after he does the Bedika and already nullify the Chametz. And over here it tells us in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Kol se'or v'kol chametz sheyesh b'chushuti, any sourdough or any leavened bread that is in my possession, shelo ra'iti v'lo be'artiv, that I didn't see and that I didn't destroy, batel yevutal v'yeh ke'afar ha'aretz. It should be nullified and it should be like the dust of the ground. So we do the nullification in the heart. We see that its main thing is to actually think it in the heart. Think that all the chametz in your rishos that you didn't find should be mivutal, should be nullified completely. And then, of course, there's also a thing that we say by words, which is kol chamira, it's called. Halacha Yud Aleph. So there is another bitul chametz acharei srifa. This one is discussing nullifying the chametz after the srifa, after the burning. The previous halacha Yud, was discussing the bitul, the nullification that we do after the bedika, after the searching for the chametz. There's another bitul, nullification of the chametz, that we do after the srifa. This is the second time we do it. Even though that the person nullified the chametz after the bedika the night before, he also does it during the day after he burns it. He should go back and he should nullify it over again. And he should incorporate and include all the chametz that he might have, and he should say kol chamira, and he should continue on with the proper verse over there. Again, he's saying over here, you can also do it in the lashon, in the language that you understand yourself. And here he writes it in Hebrew. Kol se'or v'chol chametz sheyesh b'rushuti, any sourdough or leavened bread that I have in my property. Right? Shera'iti v'shelo ra'iti, that which I've seen, that which I have not seen. Shebi'arti v'shelo bi'arti, that I have nullified, burnt, or have not burnt. Yivutal v'yeh ke'afar ha'aretz. It should be mivutal, it should be nullified like the dust of the earth. Halacha Yud Bet, number 12, is discussing a person who wants to store or pack a room, like a storage room, and he's not going to be able to check it on the night of the 14th, which is the proper night to do the checking. So what does he say about that? A room that we need to search for chametz, and he wants to make it a storehouse or a storage room, meaning to say that he wants to store in it fruit or wood or any sort of other thing. And because of this, he's not going to be able to check it when the 14th starts. He's just going to pack it in a certain way that he won't be able to check it on the 14th. He has to check on that night first, before he packs in the storage room. He needs to check that room for chametz, or that storehouse for chametz. An example would be like a silo, where a person is gonna put different types of grain or something. Obviously not chametz, that won't be chametz or something like that, or perhaps a wood storage house, where people would actually burn wood, so they would have a storage house for wood. It's not so practical to pack the whole thing and then comes along the 14th and the night of the 14th, and now you have to unpack the entire wood storehouse. So what would a person do? He would actually search it that night that he stores it, just like he says here, just like you would do on the night of the 14th. right? Even if there's a lot of time left until Pesach actually comes, or even if it's right after the last Pesach, meaning it doesn't matter how much time it is, a person can actually do the Bedika. He can actually search a place that he won't be able to have access to much earlier than the night of the 14th. And he says, Ubediavad, and it's not the best optimal thing, but if a person does it, if he doesn't check it before, that he does it if it was in his knowledge to clear it out before the time of the Bedika's Chametz, right? So he doesn't have to take it out. He doesn't have to take everything out and empty everything just to check it. However, if he thought when he stored the storehouse, if he had on his mind to actually empty it out during the days of Pesach, let's say it was certain things in the storage that were applicable or usable on Pesach, he has to empty it now, Erev Pesach on the 14th, when we do the Bedika. And even though it's really difficult for him, or he might have a monetary loss, he still must do it. And it seems to be that the reason is because he has an intention when he's storing the storehouse to be using whatever's in the storehouse specifically on Pesach. Therefore, we're more stringent in that area, that the person actually has to check it, unload the entire storehouse, and check it for Pesach on the 14th night with everything else. Halacha Yud Gimel, number 13, is discussing if a person is storing the storehouse with the intention of not emptying it until after Pesach. So we discussed before what happens if it's going to be emptied during Pesach. Here, if it's not going to be emptied during Pesach, rather after Pesach. So if he's doing it, so he says over here, if a person is doing the storehouse and storing the things in the storage room with the intention of not clearing it out until after Pesach, then there is a difference regarding the time. There's two scenarios. If it's before the 30 days that precede Pesach, he doesn't have to check it, unless for sure he knows that there's Chametz in there and he has to get rid of it accordingly. And it also says here that the bittul that he does at the time of the bittul, at the time of the nullification, will help also in case there is Chametz over there. However, if it's within the 30 days of Pesach, if it's within those 30 days, so then he must do a Bedika. And why? This is because there's a minhag and there's the halacha, because a person has to start asking and finding out about the laws of Pesach 30 days before. And he's going to have to check that storehouse. And even b'diavad, if he forgot and he didn't check it, he has to empty out the storehouse of Vatko Balayla and to empty it out in the night, right after he remembered. Halacha Yudalid, number 14, is discussing if a person put wheat in a storehouse and some of them became chametz. We know that when wheat is left or flour is left moist for a certain amount of time, this constitutes chametz. Let's say he stored wheat kernels, and that currently during the time of storage they're not chametz. And afterwards, so what happened was that due to humidity and moisture, the kernels of wheat that he stored in his storehouse or in his pit, they actually became chametz. So what happens then? Even if a person stored them within the 30 days before the Pesach, and he doesn't have to clear out the bowl on the night of the 14th to check it. It's enough for him to do the bitul, to do the nullification. So what happened was he stored the wheat properly, he stored it dry, and what happened was it got wet. So it says over here, since at the time that he stored it as he properly was supposed to. And so he continues to say that if there really are in between the kernels, there are ones that are chametz, so there's a machloket, there's an argument in what a person must do, And he concludes over here that a person in his situation should ask his local rabbi. Halakha Tet Vav, number 15, is a warning for people who own chickens, for people who have chicken coops. Doesn't apply to every one of us, but for those people who have chickens and chicken coops, this one is for you. A person should not throw grains to the tarnagolim, in a damp place, toch 30 yom, during the 30 days that precede the Pesach. Perhaps you'll forget to burn them and get rid of them, and you will have Chametz over Pesach. To avoid that, do not throw wet grain or grain that will become wet to your animals within the 30 days prior to Pesach. Halakha Tet Zayin, number 16, which discusses a person who leaves his house before Pesach. He's going on a trip. Somebody who goes out on a trip before Pesach. Before he goes, so he has to appoint a messenger, a shaliach, who's going to check and going to nullify the chametz for him. And he should tell him specifically and very clearly. He should say, I am appointing you as my messenger to do the checking for me and to also do the nullification for me. And the shaliach, the messenger, he should say, he should say during the time that he's nullifying, Chametzo shel ploni, the chametz of so-and-so, and he should mention the name of the person, umikol makom gam hu ba'asher hu sham, even when he's there. Be'erev pesach b'boker vatel chametzo shebershuto. And if for some reason he comes and he's there on Erev Pesach in the morning, he should also nullify his chametz that is in his property. Halakha Tet Zayin, number 16. Let's say somebody is going out on a journey, on a trip, and he's not going to be back before Pesach. Before he goes, he can appoint, and he should appoint a shaliach, a messenger, who will do the checking and also the nullification for him. And he should tell him specifically, I am making you my messenger on my checking and on my nullification for my chametz. And the messenger should say at the time of nullification, he should say, Chametzo shel ploni, the chametz of so-and-so, meaning he should be very specific about it. And no matter what, gam hu, also him, the person who went out to travel, kasher hu sham, ba'asher hu sham, wherever he is, wherever he is, he should also do a bitul of any chametz that's in his property. Halakha Yud Zayin, number 17. Chametz shenimtza b'bayit b'toch ha-pesach, o b'shabbat, o erev pesach. Let's say you find chametz in your house during Pesach. Oh no. So what do you do then? Or if it's on Shabbos or erev Pesach. Matzah chametz b'beto b'chol hamoed. Let's say you found chametz in your house during Chol HaMoed, which is still during Pesach, yotzi v'yisofo, you should take it out and you should burn it. V'im yesh lo kezayis, and if there's an amount of chametz that's a kezayis, yivarech metchila, he should bless before al biul chametz, the same blessing that he made, that he was supposed to make erev Pesach, which is al biul chametz. Aval al pachot mikizayis lo varech, if it's less than a kezayis, the measurement of a kezayis, then he should not make the bracha. If he found it during Yom Tov and or on Shabbat Chol HaMoed, or Shabbos that fell out on Erev Pesach, that a person is not allowed to carry this chametz because it's muktzeh. Muktzeh is when something doesn't have a use on Shabbat. We're not allowed to touch it. Yachpe alav kli, he should cover on it with a kli, with the utensil, ad motzei Yom Tov or motzei Shabbat, va'ad zisofo, until after Shabbat or until after Yom Tov, he should cover it with something, and then he should burn it. V'imatz'o b'yamim achonim, if he found it in the last days, she'az b'motzei Yom Tov kvar avar Pesach, that it's already after Yom Tov, which Pesach already passed, and no mevarech alav, so he doesn't say a bracha on it, ela sofo b'lo bracha afilu yesh bo kezayit. So he has to burn it without a bracha, even if he has a kezayis, he still burns it without a bracha. With this we conclude the chapter 111, Kuf Yud Aleph, which discusses the Hilchot Bedika ubitul Chametz, the checking and the nullification of Chametz, and this is the 17 Hilchot, which can be found in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in chapter Kuf Yud Aleph 109.